Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have a very interesting guest on, Brooke Norton Lais. Now, Brooke, you're the CMO right now at Venbrook, and I want to talk a lot about what you're doing, but you've had such an interesting career. So just some highlights, right? You've been a chief marketing officer 4 times. You've been a chief brand officer. You've been a chief operating officer. You've been the CEO of your own company. You've looked at things from a lot of different perspectives, but I would love to get you to talk a little bit about your background. You started out 9 years at P&G and what that means. But one of the things that was really interesting about that, and a number of things, is that you had profit and loss responsibility on the products that you were overseeing. And that's something that as marketers, as C-level executives, in a B2B, ABM go-to-market strategy, we have to be thinking about how do we impact revenue, growth, and profits. So I think it's an incredible way to kind of start out your career, but I would just love to hear you expand a little bit more on your background before we get started and talk about relationship-led growth and how important that is these days.
Okay, very good. Yes. So thanks for having me, Steve. I did start my career at Procter & Gamble. I was 20 years old when I started there. Really was, not lying about that. And they trained me and I learned everything about marketing, how to manage a business and a brand. And I do love the model that P&G has always had, as far as I know, of the brand managers as the P&L leaders and business leaders, because that forces you as a marketer to understand how everything is interconnected, to understand how your advertising is help driving the business or not, to understand how pricing and distribution and every other aspect really impacts the business growth and the revenue. So that is very intrinsic to kind of who I am and how I work now. Where I do best, I found over the years, then going to a company like Green Dot, which was both a B2C and a B2B company. We had a lot of relationships with big vendors and companies like Walmart or Uber. Having that foundation in understanding the entire business has been so important, understanding the consumer and the client. And so I've always done best when I'm in roles where I really can understand the whole picture and act on that. I think when marketing is sort of pushed to the side as a service organization only or executional agency only, that is much more difficult for me because our impact has to take into account obviously the customer and how to drive revenue on the business.
So, one of the things that is really interesting, and I'd love to hear you talk about, because you're 100% a B2B company that you're overseeing right now, is that we don't have chief customer officers, chief experience officers in the world of B2B, really, right? Gartner, Forrester, they've been all telling us, the CMOs, for years, you got to act as the chief customer officer. McKinsey talks about like the fastest path to innovation and ideation is understanding your customer. In fact, Forrester a couple of years ago did a whole big report on customer obsession. And they came out, they said that less than 3% of companies are actually customer obsessed. Absolutely amazing. So what I'd love to know is there is an absolute obsession at P&G about understanding the customer. About connecting relationships. And I want to connect that to what you're doing now in the world of B2B. And the executive audience is going to be consuming this podcast. So what does that focus on relationships and that customer obsession, what does that mean to you based on your background and where you are today?
It's super important. The P&G saying was put the customer first, right? Customer's boss. That is super important in what I do every day. And what's interesting is that I would say my company is customer obsessed. We're a very sales-led company. We sell insurance, and my insurance sales leaders, they are 100% day-to-day interacting with their clients and really working to advocate for them, build them the right insurance programs. It is central for them to understand their clients. And then the challenge for me as a marketer is to also be able to get that understanding. When I'm not in the room every day, I'm not the one building the insurance proposals every day, but how do I make sure that I'm enabling my salespeople to really bring everything that the client needs to be able to retain those clients over time, to be able to really give more and more value to the prospective clients we have in the pipeline, to help them understand what Venbrook can bring for them. How do I get close enough to our, thousands of clients across different industries and across different businesses to be able to really add value and enable the salespeople and help close those sales? That's sort of the magic bullet we're always looking for.
So within that, you said that Venbrook is a very sales-led organization. That Forrester study that I talked about, that customer-obsessed organizations had, I'm going to remember these numbers right, I hopeful, it was 51%, or it was 41% faster revenue growth, 49% faster profit growth, and 51% better retention. The idea of kind of the revenue, the sales logic of customer obsession has really been well documented for us, and you lived it at your P&G years. How does that translate in a sales-led organization? Because I got to tell you, I've worked in a lot of B2B companies as well, and we're all sales-led. There's not one board meeting that you're going to where I'm sure the very first thing or right at the top of the agenda is, how's this year's quarter's quota? What does next quarter look like? It's all very revenue sales focused. So how does this customer obsession idea play into the revenue model of a sales-led organization?
It's a really good question. I think for us, how it's played out is that we, as marketers and as salespeople, need to be adding value for the clients, and we need to understand how we can do that, right? If you think about, there are many insurance brokerages, there are many places that they can find property and casualty insurance or employee benefits or liability insurance. We as Venbrook have to be really bringing a point of difference and doing something special for those customers. That is how we've organized in the last couple of years, is how do we ensure that we're agile and innovative, but we're also at hand and we're also doing extra things for the customers, that they don't feel that they're just seen as a number, and once the policy binds, no one ever calls them again. So some of the examples of that on our employee benefits side, we do a lot of really cool custom programming for our customers around wellness and all kinds of webinars and marketing and other things for them that are attuned to their employees' demographics and exactly what their employee base needs. That is something that my team actively works on to ensure that we're helping to retain our customers and give them the best experience over time. And there's other examples in property and casualty. We have a risk control group that goes and walks the site and looks for any other risks that might be unseen and really helps companies plan. And those are all added value services that we provide, but that also bring us one-to-one with our customers. So it's not just, I clicked online and I have this policy and that's it. We are actively building an experience over the policy year.
Because it's interesting, as the CMO, in Lake Gartner told us we got to be chief customer officers. There's also nobody playing the chief experience officer, right? That's a title that's coming up more and more. I was literally on the phone with a chief technology officer, and he had just had a conversation with his client, a CISO, and that CISO had just gone through a big evaluation, and they bought a portion of their tech package, and they looked at 14 different vendors. And he said, all I really wanted to know was, what's it going to be like working with you after I hire you?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That experience of going on and walking the facilities and getting to know, talking to the people about what they're worried about, their concerns, and how you can help ally that goes a long ways. During the sales process, the marketing and sales, that is an indication of the experience that they can expect when they actually start to work with you. You're developing the brand during that time. So I love that focus. When you and I were talking before, you talked a lot about executive access and building relationships, that one-on-one relationship, and getting access to and building the relationship with the right executives. Tell me a little bit about why you brought that up proactively in our conversation, why it's so important, and then how is it How does it play into the brand, the relationship, the experience that we've just been talking about?
Sure. For our business, it's a long lead time, a long lead sales process. Usually your policy would only renew once a year. So our sales team really has to build relationships and they have to keep those relationships up because it might not always be the right time. You might meet someone that you really click with and you think that you could help them save money on their insurance, but they just renewed last week. And so now you have 11 months until that comes up again. And so it's really about building trust over time. And where I've seen our team be most successful is when there is that kind of trust and credibility that's already on the table when a prospective client needs help with insurance. So I had a bit of an epiphany recently that for me as the marketing person, creating situations where we are able to really drive awareness and credibility of our brand of Venbrook, as well as build relationships, in the same event or, at the same time is really where I'm going to get the most value. Venbrook is not as much a household name as a lot of our competitors, who, by the way, are also way bigger than us, might not be able to provide the hands-on one-to-one experience. And so we need to continue to build our brand. We also need to get our people in front of potential clients and have that one-on-one interaction. And so when we can do both of those things, that's when we see the best value. So for example, we're an LA Kings partner and we do, advertising and awareness at the Kings game. We also have events at the Kings game. That's a place where we're able to put our brand out there next to big brands like Coca-Cola and other huge players. We're able to sit one-on-one and build relationships. And so that works really well for businesses like ours, something like that. Also, we've had several panels where we have, our insurance experts provide advice to people who need it. We did a lot of that during the LA wildfires, where we really, because we're an insurance broker and we represent 350 carriers, we're able to be objective and we're able to really play an advocate role for our clients, as well as give objective information about how to handle a claim and what you should do. And so in those situations where we're able to really provide guidance and meet people one-on-one and talk about what we can bring to the table, those do very well for us.
I like how you're being so creative in ways that you're establishing these relationships. Because I was talking to a CRO last week and he said, it's amazing. He said, it's harder and harder to get a hold of the right people, the right executives. The amount of time that goes by between when we can talk with them gets longer and longer. And the amount of time that we have their attention when we do talk to them is getting shorter and shorter. So his point was our ability to create that relationship. And you said a word in there, to play the role of an advocate. Nobody wants to be sold to, right? What they want to do is they want to learn. You're the expert that's helping them wade through probably a lot of what the sales that you have. We don't take the perspective that our buyers aren't professional buyers. They have other responsibilities that they do 99% of the time, right? Like
Right.
you're a
Right.
buyer, right? But
Yeah.
you're not a
Yeah.
professional buyer. But so understanding that and how to build that relationship, getting that access, and then making the most of that moment has never been more important. So
Yep.
what you said about how do you play the role of the advocate, like how does marketing help sales play the role of the advocate? That's, I think, a really important point that you made.
Yeah. I mean, for us specifically, I was referencing, we do claims advocacy for all of our insurance partners. That's part of our role. So if we insure your building and it floods, then our broker is responsible for making sure that claim is taken care of, right? So that is part of their role that they're going to play day to day. And it's one that perhaps buyers don't understand at first. You don't want to think about the claim until that happens, right? But when it happens, you need to have the right person in the seat that can advocate for you. So I think in terms of how that comes across in interactions, I think it's us really helping the sales team have that very kind of specific real life pitch, right? Where it doesn't feel like a pitch, but it's being able to articulate this is exactly what I will do for you if you are my customer. And having materials available that describe that, but also, ensuring that they're able to see it from the customer's perspective in terms of how we provide unique value and what we will be doing long term for customers.
There was a study that McKinsey did and they found that only 15% of B2B companies actually use the voice of the customer in their strategic decision making, which is just
Mhm.
amazing, right? You just,
Yeah,
it's that we all know that the customer is our North Star, right? And we're
right.
all say that we're customer focused. We all say that we're customer obsessed, but it's actually living that. And then to your point, bringing that to life for the salespeople so that when they're actually front and center, they can use that as a way to create advocacy. So you said that, it's a long sales life cycle. You talked about ways to stay relevant over an extended sales journey. How do you as the marketing department help that relationship stay alive, stay nurtured over an extended sales journey?
Yeah. And that's an ongoing challenge that we're working through right now. We have to figure out how we utilize our CRM and our email communication effectively to be able to really communicate well with our current clients and also, those folks that may be in the pipeline so that they're hearing from us over time about all the different services we offer and it's in the back of their mind so that when a need comes up, they remember, oh, Venbrook, I may use Venbrook for my property insurance, but I remember I got an email from them that they actually do claims adjusting as well. I could call them about that. I learned that they also do employee benefits and I just got a 40% increase on my
Hmm.
corporate benefits. So maybe I should call Venbrook and consider them. So I think for us, it's really because we have sort of end-to-end insurance offerings. And that's the other thing that I'm constantly trying to educate potential clients about. How do we create the right campaigns so that they, understand what Venbrook offers and when the need arises, they trust us enough to call us, right? So the trust may come from the person they work with day to day. If they're already a client in one aspect of our business, it may come from seeing our LinkedIn over time and all the articles that our team writes and all the things that we provide expertise in. But how do we have enough awareness and credibility that they're going to call us when they have a
So
need?
you had made a really interesting comment. You had talked about that establishing the executive relationships is so difficult and hard. And then maintaining those relationships, we really got to
Mhm.
work on it. But you talked about how the relationship can actually become an executive sponsor internally. And you can scale within the organization through that executive relationship. And I just wanted to know a little bit more about what you were talking about and what you were thinking on that.
Yeah, it happens in so many different ways, but I do think it's really network effect, right? And when we have some executives who have really strong networks and who have been in this business for decades, and they have then built up trust with people that maybe they haven't officially done business together yet, but they've built up that trust and they've provided advice and they've been in the industry contributing for so long that the relationships they may have at senior levels. So someone in the C-suite of our company may have a relationship with someone that's a C-suite of a prospective customer. That really helps us in that we're able to set up the right meetings with the people at maybe slightly lower levels that are going to make the decisions about insurance. We have an advocate in the C-suite already. So that's the dream, right? It doesn't always happen, but I think, when you have people in your company that have networks that have really put in the time over the years to build relationships, it's finding the right way to ensure that we can come in and bring those people the resources and the products and the coverage that they need. So it is a lot of pressure, right? Because then you really have to deliver because you have somebody in the executive team that has a relationship in that company and the team better deliver. So it does add some pressure. Yeah.
So, it's interesting because these executive relationships, so you just talked about scale, they also have a way of actually lowering cost of acquisition. And you talked about like a trust-led revenue strategy. And I know it's fueled from like your days at P&G and now focus on P&L as a CMO. How does a trust-led revenue strategy lower cost of acquisition?
I wish I knew for sure how to answer that question, that I had the metrics on that I could give you. But I think what I've been learning is that, especially in today's environment, so being that we've been through COVID and now people are working at home so often, and there's not really a second place for a lot of people. If you remember the theory of a first place being home, second place was work, third place is where you socialize, like the coffee shop and friends. Because that second place for a lot of people has gone away, I feel like right now in 2026, people are really looking for that third place and they're really looking for the social interaction. It's become more and more important just to people in their everyday lives. And so I think when you can have your marketing dollars go towards building relationships and that social interaction that people really want, that adds so much on top that maybe wouldn't have been as exciting in 2000 when people were going to happy hours every night. Now, if you're able to really build trust and relationships by utilizing your marketing dollars, getting people together, that's actually a bit more of a unique interaction than it used to be. And I think it means more. And so, in that way, I would spend in our business where it is so trust is really number one for sure. Like, you're not going to make a quick decision on your insurance for your company. It's one of your biggest expenses. I would spend my money on getting people together, creating that socialization, and building relationships, because it's also fulfilling this other human need right now.
Yeah, I'm hearing definitely a big focus on community-led, social-led events and marketing campaigns. And I've talked to a number of CMOs that they're getting back out on the road and they're doing dinners where they're inviting a close-knit 12, 15 executives to come and share and have dinner. The conversation just takes off on its own, right? But it's all led by you, and you're creating amazing relationships to begin with. I've talked to a lot of CROs that are buying more plane tickets than they had since before COVID, right? Because they're getting back out and they're placing an emphasis on the relationship. And especially over a long sale, that's so important because this gentleman told me, he said, look, if we're not building relationships a year out, we're
Yeah.
not going to make the short list. If we're not going to make the short
Right.
list, we're out. We have to be
Yes.
known and trusted. And that doesn't mean that just because the RFP got announced that all of a sudden we're going to get in there. Like, we have to be known and trusted in advance. We have to do
Right.
that work. And I think what you're doing, and one of my big takeaways, is that you're tying the strategic importance of executive relationships,
Yeah.
because it's not all about the product, the coverage. It's about the relationship to get to the table, to get into the conversation. So that's my big takeaway. So, Brooke, you've talked so much about executive access, the importance of the relationship. AI plays such an important role in business today. How are your customers and the prospects, what are they expecting in terms of AI and their interactions with you? And how does that all play into the go-to-market?
Yeah. I think for us, AI is really important in improving our processes and helping us keep costs down for our customers, especially in something like claims handling, for example. And it's really important that our customers know that we're working on that and we have that, and we're streamlining some of their rote day-to-day tasks as much as possible to save them money. However, I think it's even more important than it used to be that they really know who they're going to be interacting with on a human level and that they really trust that person. In a world where we're seeing AI all the time, it comes up in every Google search now, and it feels like it's starting to have an impact. I think those real life experiences and the people that you're going to be interacting with and choosing that person as you make a buying decision is even more important.
We've talked about so much here. I'd love to hear if there was one takeaway that you wanted the other C-suite executives that are going to be consuming this podcast to take away from our conversation. It was like one thing that you really wanted us to leave with. What would that takeaway be?
Well, I think it would be that we have to build in experiences like the dinners that you've talked about, other get togethers, whether it's at a sports venue or golf or other things. We have to build that in as part of our marketing plan to be sure that we, to your point, will be considered. and that we will be trusted and that we will be at the top of the list as decisions come around. Whatever we can do to short circuit that and get in front of the right people versus sending 20 emails, that is such a help to the organization and to, really being in the room and having the chance at delivering the revenue. I just made a choice between two conferences, and there was one where I knew there was going to be more executives in the room with my salesperson. That's the one I chose, right? Because I need to be in the room with the decision makers versus at a booth passing out tchotchkes, right? Like, we have to make those decisions as to how we can really show up. I do think it also signifies that we'll be the people that are there when you need us. When someone's making a decision about their insurance program, they're going to pick the team that they think is going to be there when they need them. That's going to really be a phone call away. That didn't just pull this out of, a digital RFP provider somewhere. That's really going to be there when you need them. That's what having these connections over time really helps us to prove that. Having get-togethers and informational sessions when we're not asking people to sign up for anything. We're just advocating for them and helping for them. That proves over time that we will be there.
Well, I have to tell you, the whole mission of this podcast is to bring different perspectives from different C-suite executives, from different industries, from all over the world. And how are we all tackling this go-to-market and the massive changes and different expectations and different ways that we have to redo our playbooks again and again, because as soon as we think we have a good playbook, it's getting ripped up and we have to develop the next one. So I just wanted to say thank you for bringing your perspectives and your insights together, because if we do that overall, it's the rising tide that lifts all boats. And I thought you were an amazing part of that rising tide today, Brooke. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.